The Birth of a Nation is the ambitious directorial debut of Nate Parker, who also wrote and stars in this film, and it's the story of Nat Turner, a slave in the South in the early 1800s who, after witnessing a long series of atrocities, orchestrates an uprising against people who are committing these atrocities. Now, this is based on true events loosely, and I say loosely because there's not that much actually known about the real man, Nat Turner, and so this film does fill in a lot of the gaps to create more theatrical storytelling for dramatic purposes, which is common. We see that in tons of movies like Braveheart and things like that, where you don't necessarily have all the info, but you want to make it fun for the audience to watch. And I was excited to see this movie because this movie made a humongous splash at Sundance. I've been a fan of Nate Parker as an actor ever since I first saw him in the movie Arbitrage. I think he's extremely talented, and I think he's somebody who has a big voice, who wants to be heard, who wants to make good films, and I was very curious to see his debut. However, I have a hard time with films like this. 12 Years a Slave broke me. That movie disturbed me on such a level that I've never watched it again. I have a really hard time with films like this because I loathe racism. It's something that I don't understand. It's something that I just simply can't relate to. And so when I see it in films like this portrayed so violently, I can really have a bad reaction to it. And so I was a little apprehensive about even going to this movie. Plus, there's a lot of media controversy surrounding this actor-director right now because of things that happened in the past. So I was like, do I even really want to see this movie? But I went to see it anyway because it's a film. And something that I've never had a hard time with is separating the art from the artist. And I think that's very important whenever a film critic is reviewing a movie. And that's hard to do in today's society because everyone wants to talk about everything. So it's hard sometimes to just hone in on the film, but I think I did a pretty good job. 12 Years a Slave, as I said, is a film that really impacted me emotionally. It left me broken. Physically, I felt slightly stomach sick after seeing that film. Oddly, this film did not give me that same reaction. Similar to 12 Years a Slave, horrifically violent and disgusting acts are committed against innocent people, and you feel for that time in history, and you are angry about it. But in 12 Years a Slave, I felt something. In The Birth of a Nation, I have a hard time connecting with these characters because the film is very conventional and it falls back far too often on a lot of narrative cliches and storytelling tropes. There are a lot of really impressive things in The Birth of a Nation, namely Nate Parker's performance. As an actor in this film, I genuinely think his performance is Oscar-worthy. I think he is incredible in this movie. He gives a very nuanced, emotionally damaged performance. And as a performer, he knocked it out of the park. Where the film falters is its screenplay and some of its pacing and the way the film is directed in regards to scene structure and harnessing everything to make it feel like it's all flowing naturally. The character in this movie has such an abrupt shift from being a preacher who believes in the Bible to being someone who wants to lead a revolt. And a very violent revolt in which no mercy is given to anyone, men, women, children, it doesn't matter. It's very, very horrifically violent. And it's one of those things where you expect a little more time to be given to make this character shift so much, especially if they're already going to fill in so many gaps with fictionalized portrayals of events. Things happen so abruptly in this film. Armie Hammer portrays the leader of this plantation, and he's kind of a better person than the other people who are enslaving people. He's a little bit kinder. It seems like he has Nat Turner's back. And then one day he's just like, hey, bring that woman inside. She's gonna sleep with my guest here because I want my house to be famous again. And I was like, where did this come from? It was just so random. So many things like that happen in this film where characters are shown to be a certain way and then all of a sudden like that, they just change drastically with no real reason. As a director, Nate Parker does a lot of really impressive things with the camera. It is a very good-looking movie. There are shots that did make my mouth drop. There is some beautiful, lush cinematography in this film. And as I said, the performances really are the strongest part. Every actor in this film really brings their A-game, especially Nate Parker. It's a film that was clearly made with a lot of passion. Nate Parker put a lot of his own money into this project and tried to get other people to help him to make it. He didn't want to act again until he portrayed this character, but it's such a strange choice because so little is known about this actual man and what his impact on history really was, that it really is just a film about some very courageous people who are doing something that maybe didn't actually work. And the film doesn't quite touch those emotional heights that it should. The film should have been much more tragic than it was, because it tries to sell his revolt as this big victory, when in reality, it didn't actually make the impact that he was hoping it would. And if the film touched on those tragic events a little more, and the fact that that is just so horrifically sad that it didn't really work out the way he wanted it to, then I think this film would have been emotionally impactful in a much greater way. The thing that I appreciated the most about this movie from a storytelling perspective is its examination of the way man can take the Bible or religion and twist it to make their beliefs seem proper or correct. And that was something that I think should have been explored a lot more in this film, because he's forced to preach to slaves only specific verses that make it seem like slavery is a good thing. He's not allowed to read other verses that directly contradict that. And I wish the film had discussed that more, rather than falling back on so many cliches of this type of filmmaking. I think Nate Parker has made a very ambitious film, one that I think people should see at some point, but I don't really think it's as good as other films that are similar, like 12 Years a Slave. It didn't have that emotion. It didn't leave me feeling as shaken and disturbed and disgusted as 12 Years a Slave did, because I didn't have that connection with the characters in this film. The tonal shifts were just too abrupt in some of these characters and in the structure and pacing. There's also a lot of odd metaphorical imagery that didn't really work for me, but still, this is a very ambitious film that at some point I think people who appreciate filmmaking should check out. I'm going to give The Birth of a Nation a C+. Could have been a lot better, and I think it was far too overhyped at Sundance. I think this is, as I said, a film that deserves to be seen at some point, but it is not that next level classic that I was hoping it was going to be. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching. Again, sorry that some of these reviews were late. I was on vacation. I actually went and saw this movie last night, and I was the only person in the theater. That was kind of cool. I had the whole place to myself, but I really needed to sleep on this movie because I did feel conflicted by it. Guys, thank you once again for watching, and if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.